All right, speaker 2. We got Kristen. Kristen is the marketing director for female-founded Jackalope Brewing. Raise your hand if you're drinking a Jackalope Brewing beer. Oh, there we go. Okay, so everybody knows what we're talking about.
Yes.
Are you drinking?
I am drinking a Jackalope
What are you
beer
drinking?
right now. I'm drinking Thunder Ann. I see a few out there, but Thunder Ann had a Bear Walker as well, so it's good.
Love it.
It's fantastic.
Super
So,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about your work, the brewery. Give us the whole rundown.
Yeah. So how many people have been to Jackalope? Awesome. That's so good to see. That's fantastic. So it's just down the road. We do have our original location on 8th Avenue South, but then did just open up a second location in Wedgwood, Houston. And my work at the brewery kind of varies every single day. I do a lot of the art direction for the cans. We work with a local artist here in East Nashville. His name is Chris Cheney, to really make sure that we represent Nashville art. But then at any given time, too, I'm loading out kegs or giving tours or working on furthering our sustainability initiatives that are really happening at the brewery right now. So it's a busy, it just depends on the day, really.
Well, so it might seem insignificant, but the can,
Yeah.
that's pretty unique for Nashville.
Yeah.
Did you guys know that? Well, you can share the fact. You're
Yeah, so Jackalope is the first brewery to can their beer in Nashville, and actually probably one of the first in Tennessee as well. And for us, it was a huge initiative because here in Davidson County, where everybody is sitting, you are not able to recycle glass curbside. And to us, 6 years ago, cans weren't everywhere at the time, and it was a huge initiative for us to take a risk on doing canned beer. And for us as well, quality is super important. So putting your beer in can, it prevents light from getting to your beer, which will preserve the beer longer shelf life, but then you also don't get that skunking flavor. So it was really a no-brainer. It was really a no-brainer for us to be able to recycle. It also uses less trucks, too, to ship it. You could put more beer on the truck, use less trucks to actually get it to where you want it to go. And I always like to say, if you drop a bottle, it breaks, but if you drop a can, you can crack a hole and shotgun it. So that's beer preservation right there.
So explain this a little bit more. Like, have people picked up on the whole canning thing? Are people aware of the fact that canning is way more sustainable?
I don't think people are really aware of the numbers. If you have a glass bottle and drink out of a glass bottle, less than 10% actually makes it back into the recycle. But with a can, generally in Nashville, it's about 50%, which is great for us. And if it makes it into the recycle, then it has an 80% chance to be reused within 6 months. So that's super important to us because, we'd like to use more cans, but it's nice to know if we can actually use aluminum that had been in one of our cans at some point.
So how did you get involved with Jackalope?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, you're interested, I assume, in art, camping outdoors.
Yeah. So I actually, I don't know how many of you did this, but you moved to Nashville for music.
Let's see a show of hands. I'm curious.
Anybody else? There we go. There's a few. So I gave music a good college try and decided that I loved drinking beer. As you do. But also within drinking beer, I realized that I loved the communities that a beer community could form. I love that you could get together for fun events with your friends at a brewery, or get together for pickup for a pint or an invasive species removal and get to drink beer at the end of it. So I actually walked into Jackalope about 7 years ago and was just like, I know you guys don't have a marketing department yet because it's 2 of you. So I was like, I'm going to work for you for free until you hire me. And they kind of laughed at me. And I worked for free for 6 months at Jackalope trying to figure out what Instagram is and what Facebook was and kind of setting up that stuff. 6 months later, they decided to start paying me, which is good, which is awesome. So
cool. Oh, drop my notes.
7 years later.
So you have the Canyon Initiative, which is obviously monumental. What's coming up at Jackalope that you're excited about from a sustainability and stewardship perspective?
Yeah. So right now, we have the first CO2 recapture machine installed at Jackalope in Tennessee. So it's the third one in the country for a microbrewery. But what it does, so when you ferment beer, you add yeast to it, and it creates alcohol and CO2. So in a standard microbrewery, that CO2 is actually released into the atmosphere. And of a brewery our size, it can waste about 100,000 pounds of CO2 per year. And then you end up buying CO2 on the back end to package your beer or keg your beer. So, 7 years ago or 8 years ago now, when our founder, Bailey Spalding, was brewing, she was like, there's got to be a way to close this. There has to be a way to close this loop. And we actually contacted a company called Earthly Labs out of Austin, Texas, and they had just come up with this machine. And so we got it installed. So what it does is it captures the CO2 through the pipe in the fermenter. It converts it into liquid CO2, and then we hold on to it until we can use it in the packaging process on the back end. So right now, Bear Walker, all the CO2 that Bear Walker is producing is actually being captured, and we hope to, by the end of the year, have all of our fermenters hooked up to that CO2
recapture. Awesome. So that's like the most eco-friendly drinking habit you can have.
Yeah. And two, a lot of people, all of our ingredients are tied to nature. And a lot of people too forget that CO2 is an ingredient in beer, and we need it for the bubbles pretty much. But if the CO2 is created by your beer, I always think it tastes a little bit better as well.
I love that.
Yeah.
And one of the other things too, like back to Trap Garden, back to farming and ranching, I mean, some of the best ways to keep carbon in our soil is to leave it there.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. 100%. I feel like, with kind of the way global warming is occurring, we don't want to be at the end of the world. We don't want to be the ones standing there being like, we told you so. Like, we want to do everything in our power to make sure, beer's been around for 5,000 years. Let's make sure it's around for 5,000 more. So
thank you so much for sharing your beer and your story.